When your journey to parenthood looks completely different to what you had imagined, when you're met with disappointment month after month and then year after year, how do you find the hope and the motivation to keep going? On today's episode, I am speaking with two very special guests who have two very different fertility stories that are still ongoing. This is a conversation for anyone who is in the depths of trying to conceive and looking for some light at the end of the tunnel.
Welcome to Your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And I actually have two very special guests on the podcast conversation today. You may know Kat and Amanda from the What the Fertility podcast. They started this podcast a few years ago when they were both in the middle of their own fertility journeys. And their lives have unfolded as the podcast has grown, which is amazing. I don't think that I would have had the confidence to speak out in the way that they have when I was in the depths of my own fertility journey. I was riddled with this sense of shame and frustration. And I remember before I started IVF the first time, I didn't even tell my mum, which is wild to me now, to think that I would hide away everything that I was going through in such a big way. But these girls who started trying to conceive when they were really young, in their mid-20s, have so much to say. And I'm so pleased that they do, because they have given voice to a lot of women who haven't felt as comfortable sharing their own stories. And what is so important about the work that they do is that it is a place to be heard. And so much of this journey we hide away. We don't know who to talk to about it. We feel ashamed and frustrated that we can't do the one thing that we were told our whole lives would be so easy. There is this wonderful quote that I love from Brené Brown that says, "Shame loses its power when spoken." And that is so true. Shame needs silence. It needs secrecy and judgment. But when you're in a place where you're met with understanding and empathy, everything changes. So in this conversation, we speak about loss and grief and the pain of watching others around you move on with their lives. We get a little bit woo and we talk about manifesting, surrender, and we also go into IVF and embryo adoption and so much more. So I hope that you get a lot out of this conversation. You may want to get a tissue at the ready. So let's begin. Here is Kat and Amanda. Kat and Amanda, I'm so thrilled to have you both here. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. We have just a really big, juicy conversation coming up today. It's going to be one of those ones that people are going to listen to and just say, "Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that." And there's going to be so many moments where people resonate with everything that you say. So big welcome. Before we jump into a little about your journeys and how you kind of got here into doing the work that you do, can we start by learning just a little bit about who you are and the work that you are currently doing in this fertility space?
Yeah, absolutely. So myself, Kat, and Amanda, we actually have known each other for over 20 years, which is wild. We are childhood friends. And when we both kind of encountered infertility in our mid and late 20s, we had reconnected. And so currently, how we've connected with you, we have our own little fertility community called What the Fertility, and we are in a similar podcasting space as you are, Jen.
Yeah, amazing. And the stories that you share are, they're so wide ranging and they're all so unique and valuable and important. And this idea of sharing stories is one of the most, I think, helpful and validating things that you can do. And I'm sure you relate to this, but I struggled for a really long time to open up about what I was going through when I was struggling to have my family. But when I did, things changed so much. It was such a sense of relief to be able to not only get it off my chest what I'd been going through, but to find that there were so many others that were in that boat and that, they struggled in so many different ways. We realize how common it is. So I would love to hear about your own journeys. Amanda, do you want to start? I know your journeys
Yeah.
are very, very different and
Yes.
very, very important in so many different ways. So let's start. Amanda, can you tell us about your
Yeah.
journey to family?
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to quickly say, and I think what you were talking about of how just like different everyone's story is. And I think that was why we started with fertility and having just so many different people on it, because me and Kat's stories are so different that we knew no one else's story was going to look exactly like ours. And that's why we felt it was so important to have all these different peoples from all different walks of life so that hopefully one person can relate to someone else. So I just want to briefly say that.
Please.
But yeah, so mine, I was super young. My husband and I are high school sweethearts. So we've been together for a long time. And so once we got married, we knew we wanted to just start a family right away. And so I was only 24 at the time, turning 25, I think I was. And we tried for a year and nothing happened. And then I finally did wind up getting pregnant naturally after a little over a year of trying. And that ended in a miscarriage. And that was like the first time that like I think it really like hit that like, okay, maybe this is going to be a little harder than I thought it was going to be. And I know so many people think that like you get married and then you just try and then 1 month later you're pregnant or you're going to get pregnant on your honeymoon or whatever it may be. So we definitely were very naive to the whole situation of infertility. And especially being so young, every single doctor was like, you're healthy, you're in good shape, like you are only 25, like you're going to have so many eggs, like just keep trying all this stuff. So I definitely did not anticipate for what like was about to come. Fast forward, we obviously, like I said, we had that miscarriage. And then since we had tried for a year, I then spoke with my OB and she felt like it was good that we could move on to the fertility clinic. And I was diagnosed with lupus during this time as well. And so I was working with a functional medicine doctor at the same time. And she actually was the first person who did any kind of fertility testing on me, even prior to me going to that fertility clinic. And that was the first time that someone ever told me that I could really potentially have a hard time getting pregnant. So, I did blood work and they did the like AMH, the anti-Mullerian hormone testing. And that's where it literally told me that I basically had eggs of like a mid 40-year-old. And this was at 25. And so that was like really hard to hear. So I got that result the month before I actually got pregnant, the natural pregnancy. So sorry, that was confusing. But I got that test result. And then that 1 month later, that was when I found myself pregnant. So I was like, oh, they told me this, but that's still not true. I still have all these eggs clearly because I got pregnant. And then that's when like 8 weeks later, I did have a miscarriage. So then that is when it really hit us that we're like, okay, so maybe those tests were right and it might be a little bit harder. So fast forward, we moved to the fertility clinic. My husband and I did all the testing, everything you normally do when you start going through it. Based on the test results, though, with everything, they said that it would be basically a waste of our time if we did any like IUIs or anything, that we should just go straight to IVF. So we did IVF and we did 2 rounds and we got embryos each time, but very slim amount. I think I got like 4 eggs. My first egg retrieval, I think my second egg retrieval, I got 3 eggs. So there was always very minimal. I didn't have a lot of eggs at all. And basically the biggest thing was every single time we would go and get them genetically tested. So we would make it to day 5 embryos, but they all would come back as like abnormal. So we never had anything to actually transfer. So that was probably the hardest part, was just the roller coaster. We would like get the positive result of, okay, we actually got some fertilized. And then we would like cried 2 days later because we were told like, okay, they still don't look good. They are growing, but they don't look exactly like something seems wrong. They're very slow. And so it was just like this constant roller coaster of just like good and bad news. And then of course we were told like, okay, they're all abnormal, but you're still so young. So let's try again. And honestly, that was like the biggest thing was they told us to not even test them originally because of my age. And so I know this is like a taboo topic. Some people are like, don't test. I am like, that's like my biggest thing is I'm like, test them. Because for us, like I could still be technically transferring so many years later and still getting like IVF rounds that are failed transfers over and over again, or miscarriages or what. And so for us, it was just like an answer that we needed. And as hard as it was, I mean, it ripped the Band-Aid off and it allowed us to move on and to like try something else, which ultimately led us to embryo adoption. So all that to say, we clearly had multiple failed rounds, but it led us to the best thing in the world. And we have a son through embryo adoption, and he's literally our miracle. He is 2 years old, and he's the best thing ever. But we adopted 3 embryos through embryo adoption, and I got to carry him, which was so cool. And I got to breastfeed, which was just something really important to me. And so we were able to do that. And so I transferred him in 2021. And so, yeah, he is turning 3 in November. And then we have recently geared back up for starting to have siblings. And we actually did a transfer this past May. But I did have a chemical pregnancy. So we lost one of our embryos, which was just really heartbreaking for us. Because in my head this whole time, I have pictured these 3 like siblings, because it's just what we've known since December of 2020 is when we adopted them. So in my head this whole time, I've always been like, I have 3 kids. And so I just have stuck onto that. And so losing this last one was really hard. So now I am getting everything ready again for our last transfer, which is actually scheduled for December. And so we're just obviously hopeful and praying that this one works to give him a sibling. So that was a lot, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
No, it's not a lot at all. It's a very beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry for your losses in so many ways. Like loss isn't just not just that. I hate the word just on the fertility journey. It isn't only a pregnancy loss, it's the loss of your future and, all of the plans that you had for what you thought your life was going to look like. And that changes so constantly, doesn't it? And then you get to this place where you think you're over one hurdle and yet there is another hurdle and it just keeps going. So thank you for sharing that story. It's such an important thing. And before we hit record, I was saying how much I appreciate you sharing your stories because you're both really young when you started trying. And as you mentioned, all you're met with when you're in your mid to late 20s is, oh, just keep trying. Please don't worry. It'll happen. It's like age is this magic cure for things that it surely isn't. So I so appreciate you sharing how you built your family. So thanks, Amanda.
No, of course.
Kat, your story is completely different and beautiful in its own way as well. Can you share how you started out on your journey of trying to conceive and where you're at now as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That was just hearing Amanda's story, like brought me back into my own. And I was a little bit behind Amanda. We started trying, I was 28, so a little bit older as well. I know we started trying, January of 2020. I remember I was actually in England. So, I had forgotten my birth control pills and it was kind of like, well, let's go ahead and start trying. So for us, we were super naive. I honestly didn't know how you got pregnant. I just so didn't understand my body, my cycle. And you just think like you try and you could take a pregnancy test the next day. I mean, maybe not that silly, but I didn't know. So we tried for 2 to 3 months. And I think once I realized, okay, that you have to ovulate, you have to try during a certain time frame. We tried that for a month and we quickly got pregnant. So I was pregnant April of 2020. I work in obstetrics and gynecology and have for the last 12 years. So I have ease of access to OBGYNs, ease of access to reproductive endocrinologists. And so I thought I was educated. I was not. So I get this positive pregnancy test. We're very excited. And around 5 weeks, I had just mentioned, because I work in the clinics, and I had just kind of turned to one of the physicians and said, I don't really feel pregnant. What do you suggest? And I honestly was just hoping that she'd say, oh, you're pregnant. That's normal. And she said, well, we can test for that. Why don't we just do a quick blood draw? I'll do it right now and you'll get your number back. And so we did that. And at like 5.5 weeks pregnant, everybody listening to this probably knows what a beta is at this point. And so I get this beta back and it's like low 200s. And so I think if you know, it's 5.5, 6 weeks pregnant, that is way too low. So that was kind of my first experience with trending betas, waiting those 24 hours. And ultimately at 8 weeks, it finally got up to that 1500 where you can go see the pregnancy on an ultrasound, and there was nothing there. And so she had just kind of said similar comments to Amanda, you're so young. This is normal. People have miscarriages, all those things. And I do want to preface that this physician is somebody I still work with, and she's learning and she's asking questions. And so I think that when we do share our stories and people hear that, they're like, well, what would you rather us say? And I think, like, for me, I don't know. I think I really don't know what I would want them to say, but in the moment, that was definitely the worst thing they could have said, just dismissive behavior. And it leads to Amanda's point of like, okay, well, I'm going to get pregnant quickly and this will not happen to me again. So I have a long journey, so I'll kind of fast forward. But in that year of 2020, I went on to have 4 pregnancies, miscarried all 4 pregnancies. The second one was an early biochemical pregnancy. So it was just where you were getting the beta results, but you couldn't see it on the ultrasound. The third was a blighted ovum. So for me, that was, again, new. It was a third miscarriage, but it was something I had never experienced, where your body thinks you're pregnant, you're growing this gestational sac, but there's no embryo that's growing. And so that one went until 10 weeks. And that was my first experience with, I guess, a medicated management of a miscarriage. So they gave you the medication pills and you did that at home. And Amanda, did you have a similar experience there? Yeah. And we talk about that on our podcast. It was a very just intense and traumatizing experience. And so at that point, we had decided to take a break. 3 pregnancies, 1 year was enough. But we did get pregnant a 4th time in early November. And that was our first pregnancy where we got a heartbeat. We found out the gender of that baby. And so for me, all 4 of these are different, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm getting further and further along. So I really kind of had no answers. I have no diagnosis still to this day. All of my labs are quote unquote normal. They're optimal. In these 4 years, I did, after the second miscarriage, move into reproductive endocrinology, still was unable to find answers. But with that 4th loss, I did have a DNC. We did test the baby, and it was a genetically normal embryo and baby. So at the end of my first year of trying to get pregnant, I was just left with no answers, 4 miscarriages. At that point, I was kind of like lost and not really knowing what to do. I think for listeners, if they're unaware, recurrent pregnancy loss is only 1% of the population worldwide. And then to not also have a diagnosis, that breaks you down into like an even smaller category. And so it's just difficult. I didn't really know where to turn. And again, to Amanda's point of getting your embryos tested, whether that's through IVF or through miscarriages, it was important to me because for me, it was, okay, if these embryos are abnormal, then I'll take that route of assisted reproduction technology. Or if it's normal, then maybe it's me and maybe I need to focus on my hormones or uterine abnormalities. And so that, for me, getting that result in December, early January the following year, I then again felt like, okay, well, maybe I need to focus on myself. So at that point, my husband was pretty tired of me just go. And he's like, you need some help, self-help, self-care. So we took about 3 or 4 months off. And that was when I got really into like the manifestation journaling. I had really started to explore adoption and started to explore embryo adoption. I did a lot of like inner work of what is this goal that I'm trying to do? Is it, I want to be a mother? or is it that I want to be pregnant? And really trying to nail down like what this like really deep fueled desire was. And I really just knew it was that I wanted to be a mom and I wanted to grow a family. And so I was really all in by April of 2021 for adoption. And I don't know if you know this part of my story, but we did start working with an adoption agency in April of 2021. Simultaneously, my husband, that was not something that my husband was ready to jump into. And so he had said, let's try IVF. He really didn't want to do either, but he knew that I was kind of done just trying again and again without really having answers or to change something. And so we did our one round of IVF. Before that round of IVF started, I did get pregnant for a fifth time. I miscarried at 6.5 weeks right before. And then I remember right when I started bleeding, I was able to start the birth control pills because we had like already done the intro and we had already pretty much committed to getting started. And so similar to Amanda, I don't know, don't compare results if you're listening, but I got 9 eggs and I only ended up with 1 embryo. And for us, it was very confusing because every time we had ever tried to get pregnant, we got pregnant, which I think in itself is not the norm. And so for when we went into IVF, we were like, well, the issue is not going to be getting the embryos. The issue is going to be like my body being able to carry them to term. And so that was an interesting experience for us. We felt like we had spent so much time and so much money and just mental health again, and just doing all those medications and all of that. And we did genetically test because we only had one, and it was a normal embryo. So we did everything and anything since it was the last one. And we did transfer that in November of 2021 and had a chemical pregnancy. We had 2 rounds of betas. They never got over 30. And then I started bleeding. So that was my 6th pregnancy. And that was actually on Thanksgiving in the US. And my husband at that time, we had still been working with the agency, the adoption agency. So I had been doing the home studies and getting all the paperwork. And again, my heart just really wasn't in IVF. I had gotten really excited about adoption. I had been listening to all the podcasts, and Amanda's shaking her head. She knows, like, I was really, really excited. And so my husband at that time, we took a walk around the neighborhood and he signed the papers. And so had kind of closed the chapter on biological children. I was, again, very excited. We spent the month of December and early January doing our adoption book, which went out to birth mothers. And January 24th of 2022, we went live with our adoption agency, which meant like the book would go out to other families. And I got pregnant for a 7th time that evening. I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. And I know this is my story and my journey, so I'm like thankful for it. But I also kind of hate the cliche of adopt and you'll get pregnant. But that 7th pregnancy is my now 2-year-old daughter. So it was beautiful. I think I could dissect that if I needed to, but it was a very interesting experience. I had a horrific pregnancy. I had hyperemesis, so I was bed rest the majority of the pregnancy. But yeah, it was beautiful. Similar to Amanda, the best thing that's ever happened to me. And looking back, I don't regret or wouldn't change any part of my journey to have been where I am, with that pregnancy and having her. Where I am now is I was not ready to jump back into the PTSD of recurrent loss. And so at 18 months, when my daughter was 18 months, this past April, I accidentally got pregnant and we had an ultrasound. We saw the baby's heartbeat. We found out she was a girl and we miscarried. So that was very unexpected. I wasn't ready mentally. I was not ready mentally at all. And so to get thrown into that and then to have the hope when you kept going to each scan and each appointment kept progressing, we did find out that baby was not compatible with life. So that was different. We just had not experienced that. And then the following month we got pregnant again and had a chemical pregnancy. So I have been pregnant 9 times and we are starting to try again officially this month. So I know that was long as well, but very different from Amanda's.
Oh my gosh, Kat, I'm so sorry for all of your losses and just how heartbreaking they are, all in different ways. From a blighted ovum to seeing a heartbeat to having a genetically normal baby and losing an IVF. So, like, it's just all of it is so much. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to go back to this part of your journey that you mentioned where you really took some time to ask yourself what it is that you want or what you wanted in that moment. And I think that we get so caught up in this journey about getting this positive pregnancy test. I just want to be pregnant. I just want to be pregnant. Can I move on with my life? But when you think about it and you zoom out in your life, you are pregnant for, the blink of an eye in terms of your life. And we don't just want to have a baby and then, say we had a baby. No, we want to have a life. We want to share our family with that child. We want to build life with them. And being able to really zoom out on that and become aware of what it is that you're trying to achieve in your life is so valuable, I think. So can you talk a little bit more about how you did that? And maybe, Amanda, if you want to as well, reflect on this idea of just surrendering into the process and using this idea of journaling and manifesting to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really hit the nail on the head with just saying you're only pregnant for 9 months. And for me, it was, I always like kind of looked into the future of like, I want to be sitting around a Christmas tree with a large family. And is anybody going to remember that I was pregnant for 9 months? And like, does that really matter to me? And I just kept kind of thinking, and I think at that point, I just was so hopeless and there was really nothing else to do. It was, after 4 miscarriages, you're kind of numb. And it was for me, I wasn't willing to actively try again. And so I did do a lot of manifestation of just what do I see my life looking like? And, 3 months, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years. And none of that included really a pregnancy for me. It was just that life and that child. And so, Amanda, I'm sure you went through adoption as well. And so, not as well, I guess I didn't go through it, but you went through adoption. And so I'm sure you have very similar thoughts there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think for me too was also like the genetic side of it was like, is this really this important to have a genetic biological child? And my husband and I, it wasn't even like truly a blink of an eye. Like we both were just like, no, that doesn't matter to us. The same with if I couldn't have carried the pregnancy, like that part of it, like you said, it's a blink of an eye. It's not really something. Yes, of course, I'm so thankful that I got to experience that. But I'm more thankful that I have him every day and that I get to now be his mom for the rest of my life versus the 10 months that you get to be pregnant. And so, yeah, I think definitely we didn't even have to truly really even like think about it because it was just, we knew for us that just being parents was what we wanted.
Thank you for sharing that. Amanda, do you feel like the pain of what you went through and, so much of it, like I said, it's loss in different ways, isn't it? It's the loss of what you thought was going to be. And even these interactions that we have with medical professionals, and it's incredibly traumatic to go through. Do you find that what you went through kind of eased or disappeared when you had your baby, or do you find you're still working through it at the moment?
No, so I think it definitely went away for a while, but it's actually back now. And I think because we're trying for another one, that now everything has got brought up, not only just this last loss, but it brings up everything that we went through from like the start of trying all over, which I thought I like healed and processed and truly was, I'll never forget it, of course, but I felt like I was at a healthy place with it. Until this last, I would say 4 months or so, has been probably the darkest time I've had since having my son. And it's just brought up so much. And there's constant triggers. There's family members in my life that are pregnant. And just like the same timeline that my child would have been right now. And so there's just like a lot of constant reminders that I think has brought up a lot of things in the past. But it did go away for a while. So if I wasn't trying again, I don't know if it would have like manifested back up or what, but yeah.
I think that's so true. I have 2 children and we've never tried for a third. So I can't really relate the trauma of what I went through to trying again. But I too thought that it had gone away and that I had processed everything and worked through everything that I needed to work through. But my goodness, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even the process of trying to have another baby that brought things up. It was all sorts of things, and after a while you realize that your triggers are still there and they still, I will be out and about and I will see a family with 3 or 4 kids and I'll have a moment where I'm just like, okay, not about you, don't cry, and this is years later and I'm still working on it. And, I don't necessarily want to try again, but you're right. The trauma of what you go through, it doesn't disappear and you don't forget it. You get to a point, I think, where you can live with it and it's a part of your journey and your history, but it never goes away. And I think one of the most healing things that we can do is to share what we've been through, which is why I love your podcast and what you've created so much. And I wanted to ask you, Kat, why do you think that sharing your story and hearing from others is such an important part of this journey?
Yeah, I think it just gives other people hope. I know it did for me. And again, like Amanda and I are very different, but she was the first person that I had connected with. I saw she had shared her miscarriage online and it made me feel less alone. And it made me feel like I had a little bit of like an open invitation to then share my story. I saw a little bit how she shared hers and how it was so positively received and just the support that she got even from me, somebody that I hadn't, I don't think we had connected in over a decade, and now we're now we're really good friends. But I just think it brings hope. And for me specifically, I truly attest my success of my daughter to something that I found on Instagram and social media. I found a girl going through recurrent loss. She tried a specific medication, and I took that to my physician and said, look, this girl did this and let me try it. And that was for my daughter, Brooklyn. And that medication is the only difference I made. And that to me is what I'll continue to try. And so I think not only hope, but maybe even some success stories. I think we feel so alone, and you don't go to the grocery store and talk about miscarriage. You don't go to the movies and talk about like, I'm really having a hard time. And it's really not talked about in your inner circles. And so the online space, I think, has just been so beneficial to the infertility community of being able to almost share anonymously or not anonymously. And I will always share my story, and I always like to have anyone reach out to me. I know Amanda's the same way, just to give hope and make sure that people don't feel alone.
That's so true. When I started going through IVF, it was 2017, and it wasn't a big thing on social media, and now you see every day I open my accounts and there are women injecting themselves and putting those videos up, and I'm just so in awe of the women that can do that. I never saw it when I was going through my own journey, and I don't think I would have had the guts to do it myself because I didn't see it anywhere. So you're right. The more that we are sharing, the more that it does help people to feel less alone. What would you say to people who don't feel comfortable to speak out about their journey and they're just really struggling to find someone who can support them? What is the best advice that you would give to someone in that position?
I will just say, so I'm actually a licensed therapist. I'm not I'm not practicing right now, but I would say that is probably would be, and I'm sure Kat would also agree, is to seek counseling, to find a therapist who maybe specializes in infertility, especially if you're not wanting to talk with, even if family or if there's not really a friend that you feel comfortable with, because sometimes people don't tell their family and they either just have their partner going with it. That I think finding a third party outside of just your spouse or your partner can be really helpful, because oftentimes you and your partner can either be torn apart through fertility or brought together, which obviously I hope everyone's brought together, but I know that's not always the case. So having, I think, a therapist that one understands infertility and either specializes in loss or grief or what may be, but just maybe counseling, I think could be a good first start or first step.
Yeah, completely agree. Amanda, you mentioned early on in your journey that you were always met with this attitude of, oh, you're young, just keep trying. This idea that people can just give you advice everywhere you look. What is it about the fertility journey, do you think, that just gives people permission to give advice to you, to just, it does my head in. Why do you think it is?
So I've had to really think about this. And it's so funny that you said that, because I've recently talked to my mother-in-law about this because she is like a saint on earth. She is the best. She really is. I'm obsessed with her. I've known her like since I was 14. Like I love her. But she has been one of the people, and she's done it to me and my sister-in-law who also went through IVF, and not in a ill intent way, but just a ignorant way, to be honest, of giving these advice that she genuinely wholeheartedly believed she was doing the right thing or saying the right thing. And so just even little things like, okay, well, don't worry, like we'll just try again next month and we're going to just like do this, and like it just minimized what happened. And I know she wasn't trying to do that. She's trying to be positive and be supportive and trying to help us move through the next thing. But those things obviously are not helpful. And so I think I've really had to take a step back and and allow myself to not get so angry about comments people make, because I know their true intent, which is not fair because we shouldn't have to like filter through it on our own. But I think as I've gone through this year after year, that I'm doing a better job of just like kind of stopping people in their tracks when they say it, and just more now let it be a teaching moment and be like, hey, I know what you're saying. And I'm thank you for what you're saying. And I know you're trying to be super helpful, but listen, hey, that comes off this way. Or, it actually hurts my feelings because you said this. And so just kind of trying to like help the narrative and like teach them an accurate verbiage of like how to say something that's actually going to be more helpful moving forward versus try again or just go on vacation or whatever it may be that people say. I don't know.
What is the response that you usually get from people when you have that teaching moment?
So it's been two different ways, I will say. Like I've definitely had great of like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize. I'm so sorry. Like, thank you for telling me. I'll do this. I'll say something else, next time or whatever. But I've also had people that get offended and they've just been like, you know what I mean, or of course I didn't mean it in a mean way. And they get like offended by it. But again, that's on them. And so, I mean, that's something that then they need to work through, because I mean, if you're being offended when I'm telling you that hurt my feelings, then clearly you got something else going on inside of you.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I was going to add too, until you go through miscarriage or loss, or until you go through even the loss of a loved one, you have no idea how that person is feeling. And I think, and I'll speak specific to miscarriage, but it's the same thing with infertility and not even being able to get pregnant. You're 24 months in, 30 months in of just month after month trying. Like, people that make those comments have not been in those shoes. And I can guarantee you, if there's a woman that's had a miscarriage, she's not saying any of these comments to you. If there's somebody a husband, wife, partners that are going through infertility, they are not making those comments. And I think it's similar to like if a family member died and you just haven't experienced that yourself, you don't know the depth of that grief. And to them, it's almost just this like, well, there was a baby in their stomach. It wasn't like a real person. And I don't think that people understand it unless they've been through it. So while I do give people grace, and Amanda, love that. I think we've talked about that on our page as well, of like trying to be the educator. It is still frustrating. Like if I had cancer, like it shouldn't be my responsibility to educate those people, but that's where we all are. I mean, it's either do that or deal with the backhanded comment. So it's just a difficult subject.
It is. And I've never been through a cancer diagnosis, but I know a lot of people who have. At no point have I ever offered them advice because
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I don't think that's unusual. There is just something about infertility and loss where people, oh, I've been pregnant. Well, I know all about that. No, you haven't. It is endlessly frustrating, isn't it? So we'll just take it upon ourselves to be the educators, and no, we shouldn't have to, but we will.
Yeah.
It's so funny working in this space. I think day to day, I get a little bit naive and I think, we're really making a difference. People are really starting to get it. And I'm just constantly surrounded by people that work in this industry, right? And then something will happen, like, I don't know, like a silly post will go viral that I've put on Instagram. And, when something goes viral, obviously it gets shown to a lot of people that I don't normally deal with. And the comments start coming in and you just realize we have a lot of work to do.
Yep. And in America, IVF is a very hot topic politically right now. And so there's a lot of people talking that it's new to them. But then for us that have been through it, it's like, oh my gosh, you're so uneducated. And you're so spot on. Our Instagram, I'm sure all three of us, our Instagrams are, especially working in the space, it's all like-minded people, all these people that have gone through it. So we're like, oh, this is mainstream. Like everybody gets it. Everybody's being nice. And then it's just not the case.
Not the case. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Kat, what would you say to yourself of 10 years ago, or for anyone who is at the beginning of their journey who might be feeling lost, stuck, confused, not knowing where to go?
That's a great question. And I've thought about that a lot as I try for baby number 2, because my headspace in this experience has been very, very different than the first. And, for me, it did all work out. But I think just going back, people say it to you, but it is true. If you want to be a mother, you will be a mother. And that's what I would just say to myself 10 years ago, like whatever that path looks like, looking back, it'll make perfect sense and you'll completely understand why you went through all of that. And so for me, I strongly believe like if you have a desire to be a mom, you absolutely will be.
Thank you. And Amanda, what would you say?
For me, it was a lot of relying on my faith. And I know not everyone has that. But I will say, if you are someone that is faith-based, I would dive deep into that. That was something that really helped my husband and I both through the whole process and just helped us really just navigate it all. And just felt like we had a bigger purpose in it all. So that was kind of for us. And also just relying on my partner. I think that was another big thing, was doing it together and making sure that we both were okay and kind of checking in on each other. It can be really isolating, especially a lot of times it's the woman who's kind of going through it all and doing the injections and going to all the doctor's visits and all of that. So really just allowing also your partner to really be in on it with you. I think that was really important because my husband couldn't come to every single doctor appointment or anything. I mean, he worked and it just wasn't realistic because usually a lot of the time it was like 6 a.m. appointments. So just being able to just keep the conversation open and allow him to just have that conversation where he really understood where I was at, because I was the one really going through a lot of it, because it was also me who had the issue, that I think I put a lot of just like it was my fault and everything that we're going through was on me. So really just being honest and having those honest conversations with my spouse, I think was important.
So important. They do get forgotten, don't they? The men.
Yes, they do.
And even it's so hard, isn't it? Even when it is a male factor fertility issue, when you go down the medicated route, it's still the woman that has to go through so much of the treatment. And then we do tend to put the blame back on ourselves and, carry so much of the shame that goes along with that. So that is really, really helpful advice. Thank you. Just to keep that beautiful connection going with your partner is very valuable. I love this conversation, girls. Thank you for being so open and just so vulnerable about everything that you have been through in your lives and to get to this point of building your families. And it's an ongoing journey. And I look forward to being able to watch how the rest of it unfolds for you both. Where is the best place to connect with you? If anyone has any questions for both of you, or if they want to listen to the podcast, how do we do that?
Yeah, so definitely our Instagram, I think, would be the first place to go to. It's at What the Fertility Pod. So POD. But if you want to listen to podcasts, we are on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. We have a lot of episodes and we are finishing up our season right now. And then we'll be gearing up for another season here in January. So definitely check it out. Like I said, you can filter through and kind of look for one that really relates to you. But our Instagram is at What the Fertility Pod.
Amazing. Thank you. I will put a link to both your podcast and your Instagram in the show notes. So, girls, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope you loved listening to that conversation as much as I did. I was certainly holding back tears on more than one occasion there. If you found this episode helpful or it spoke to you in some way, I would love to hear from you, or please share it with someone. These resources are things that I wish I'd had at the beginning of my own journey, and you never know who may benefit from hearing them. So, on the next episode, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and this is manifestation. I am going to be walking you through a number of simple and easy manifestation tools you can use on your fertility journey to help you feel closer to your baby. So, until then, I am sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.